Emma Clarkson gripped her protest sign tightly as the wind picked up, flapping it against her arms. The cardboard read, "Freedom means justice for all," in bold red letters. Around her, hundreds of people marched through downtown Chicago, their chants echoing off glass buildings. Signs waved, fists raised, and voices united in frustration and hope. She had been marching for hours, her feet aching, but she refused to stop. These protests had become her life. Her younger brother had been unfairly arrested during a traffic stop last year, and ever since, Emma had joined every protest she could. Her parents disapproved. Her sister called her too angry, but Emma didn't care. This was her way of fighting back. She marched not just for her brother, but for everyone who felt unseen, unheard, or silenced. As the crowd rounded a corner, Emma noticed a small group of counter-protesters across the street. Their signs were different. "Respect the law," "America first," "Stop the chaos." They stood behind metal barricades guarded by police. Emma tried to ignore them, but her eyes locked on a guy standing at the front of their line. He wasn't yelling like the others, just watching. Calm, steady, tall brown hair, arms crossed. Their eyes met for only a second, but it was enough to make her look away quickly. Annoyed with herself, she pushed forward. Why had she noticed him? He was probably just another close-minded guy standing against everything she believed in. But as the skies above the city darkened with rain clouds, something else began to stir. A story neither of them expected was about to begin. The next day, Emma ducked into her favorite local coffee shop to escape the rain. The place was warm, with the smell of cinnamon and espresso in the air. She had been there dozens of times, always ordering the same thing, chai latte with almond milk. It was her comfort drink after long protest days. As she waited in line, she scrolled through her phone, reading updates about the next demonstration. A soft voice behind her broke her focus. "Long day yesterday?" Emma turned around, and her heart skipped. It was him, the guy from the counter-protest. He wore a grey hoodie and jeans, his hair damp from the rain. Without his protest sign or the crowd around him, he looked like a regular guy. Still, Emma stiffened. "You were on the other side," she said, crossing her arms. He nodded. "Yeah, Jake, I saw you too." She frowned. "What do you want?" "Nothing, just coffee. I didn't come here to argue. I come here every Saturday. Didn't expect to run into anyone from the protest." Emma hesitated. Something about him seemed different now, quieter, less intense than she had imagined. She turned back toward the counter, trying to ignore the awkward tension between them. But when her drink was ready, the barista accidentally handed it to Jake instead. He looked down at the name on the cup and smiled. "Emma, haha, now I know your name." She snatched the cup gently from his hand. "Don't get used to it," she said, but a small part of her was curious. Not angry, just curious. Jake sat a few tables away, sipping his coffee. Neither of them expected to see each other again so soon. But fate clearly had other plans. Emma didn't want to talk to Jake. At least, that's what she told herself. But as the minutes passed and the rain poured harder outside the coffee shop window, she kept glancing in his direction. Jake was sitting alone at a table near the back, reading something on his phone and occasionally looking up. He seemed relaxed, like he belonged there. She didn't know why it bothered her so much. Maybe it was because he didn't match the picture in her mind of what a protest countervoice should be. He wasn't loud. He wasn't mean. He looked normal, almost thoughtful. When she finally got up to leave, she passed by his table. "You really believe all the stuff you protest for?" she asked, without meaning to. Jake looked up. "I could ask you the same thing." Emma crossed her arms. "I was out there because people are being mistreated. You think that's fake?" Jake shook his head. "I don't think it's fake. I just think we see the world differently." She stared at him for a second, unsure how to respond. He pointed to the empty seat across from him. "Look, it's just a conversation. Sit if you want, or don't." Emma hesitated. Then, to her own surprise, she pulled out the chair and sat down. They talked for nearly an hour, about justice, about what it means to protect people, about family, about fear. Sometimes they disagreed, sometimes they found unexpected common ground. When she finally stood up to leave, Jake gave her a small nod. "Same time next week?" Emma paused. "We'll see," she said, walking out into the fading rain. But deep down, she already knew her answer. Because something inside her had shifted. Over the next few days, Emma couldn't stop thinking about the conversation she had with Jake. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Calm, honest. He wasn't trying to win an argument, he was trying to understand. That was rare. Back at home, her sister Mia noticed her distraction. "You've been quiet lately, thinking about that protest guy." Emma rolled her eyes. "He's not a protest guy, he's a counter-protester, big difference." "So what, you like him?" "I don't know him," Emma replied quickly. "I just talked to him once." Mia gave her a smirk, but didn't push. Later that week, Emma showed up at the coffee shop again. She told herself it was for the chai latte, but when she saw Jake already sitting at a corner table, her heart skipped. "You came back," he said with a smile. "Don't get too excited," she replied, sitting down across from him. "I still don't agree with most of what you say." He laughed. "Fair enough." They talked again, this time about their backgrounds. Emma shared how her brother's arrest had changed her view on justice. Jake, in turn, spoke quietly about his dad. "He was a soldier," Jake said. "He believed in rules and order. I guess that stuck with me." Emma looked at him, surprised. That explained a lot. "I'm not trying to fight you, Emma. I just want people to be safe. Even if we see things differently, I think we both care." Emma stared at her cup for a moment. "Yeah, maybe we do." And as they sat in that little shop with storm clouds outside and warm drinks in hand, something fragile began to form. Not agreement, not peace, but possibility. By the end of the week, Emma had seen Jake 3 times. Each time at the same coffee shop, always by accident. Or so she told herself. Their talks were becoming something she looked forward to, even if they still disagreed on almost everything. One afternoon, as she walked home from the cafe, her phone buzzed. It was a message from her friend Tara. "Saw you talking to that guy from the other side. Please tell me you're not getting friendly with him." Emma frowned. People had started to notice. She replied, "It's not like that. We're just talking." Tara messaged back immediately, "Emma, he's literally the enemy. What are you doing?" Emma put the phone down without replying. At dinner, her dad mentioned the protests again. "Still playing activist," he said with a smirk. "When are you going to come back to real life?" Emma didn't answer. She was too tired to argue, too full of thoughts. That night, she texted Jake. "You ever get tired of being misunderstood?" "All the time," he replied. The next morning, Emma stood in front of her mirror, staring at herself. She was supposed to be a fighter, a protester, a voice for change, but suddenly, her feelings didn't fit into a neat little box. Because Jake wasn't just the other side anymore. He was someone who listened when she spoke, someone who asked questions instead of shouting back. And that scared her more than any argument ever had. Outside, the city was still shouting, but inside her chest, something softer was growing. Confusing, complicated, and completely real. Emma arrived early at the coffee shop. She told herself she just wanted a quiet place to think, but deep down she hoped Jake would show up. She ordered her drink and picked the table by the window. 10 minutes later, he walked in, saw her and smiled like he had been hoping to. They talked for hours again, about music, about college, about how they both used to hate broccoli as kids. They laughed more this time. It felt less like a debate and more like a friendship. At one point, Jake leaned back in his chair and looked at her with a soft expression. "You're not what I expected," he said. Emma raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" "Someone who only sees the world in black and white. But you're thoughtful, fierce but thoughtful." Emma blushed slightly and looked down at her cup. "You're not what I expected either. You're too quiet to be on the loud side." He chuckled. "Maybe that's why I'm on it. Someone's got to listen." As they left the shop together, Emma's phone rang. It was her brother, Noah. She stepped aside to answer. He was checking in about an upcoming protest next weekend in DC. She agreed to go and promised to bring extra flyers. Jake overheard just enough to ask, "You're going to DC?" Emma nodded. "Big national protest. It's important." Jake hesitated. "Me too. I'll be there, but for the other side." They stared at each other. "So, I guess we're still on opposite teams," she said quietly. Jake nodded. "Yeah, but maybe not enemies." Emma smiled. "Maybe not." Because somewhere between opposing signs and quiet coffee tables, two hearts were learning how to see past lines. The trip to Washington, D.C. felt heavier than usual. Emma rode in a van with other protesters from her organization. The city buzzed with tension as more people arrived from all over the country. Some came with hope, others with anger. Everyone came with a purpose. As Emma stepped out into the cool morning air, she spotted her group gathering with signs, bullhorns, and banners. But even as she stood among them, her thoughts drifted to Jake. She hadn't heard from him in 2 days. No texts, no jokes, no early morning coffee photos. She told herself it was probably better that way. They were here for very different reasons. Still, she missed him. Across the city, Jake stood near the steps of a courthouse with his group. Flags waved, chants rose. A reporter walked past. Police stood in lines. Jake didn't hold a sign today. He just watched, thought, waited. He hadn't texted Emma because he didn't know what to say. What could you say to someone standing across from you in a crowd, chanting the opposite of what you believed? But when he spotted her, just for a second, through the sea of people, his heart thudded in his chest. She looked focused, her face strong and proud. She didn't see him. Maybe that was for the best. Later that evening, they both found themselves in the same park by accident, tired, alone, both needing a quiet place to breathe. They noticed each other at the same time. Emma sat on a bench. Jake walked over slowly. "Didn't expect to see you here," she said. "Yeah, me neither." They didn't argue. They didn't talk about protests or politics. They just sat there in silence, in the space between them. Something deeper than disagreement quietly stayed. That night in the park, the silence between Emma and Jake wasn't awkward. It was peaceful. Like both of them were too tired to argue, but not too tired to sit beside each other. Jake looked up at the stars peeking through the trees. "I used to think everything had to be either right or wrong," he said quietly. "No in between." Emma nodded slowly. "Yeah. I used to think anyone on your side didn't care about people like my brother." He turned toward her. "I care, I really do. I was raised to see things through a different lens." Emma pulled her coat tighter as a breeze blew through. "My brother got pulled over for a broken tail light. They made him sit on the curb for an hour. Didn't believe he was in college. Treated him like he was dangerous." Jake's jaw tensed. "That's not okay." "I know. That's why I march. That's why I fight." He didn't speak for a moment. Then he said something she didn't expect. "Maybe I've been standing on the wrong side of the street." Emma looked at him, unsure what to say. Jake continued. "I'm not saying I'll change everything I believe overnight, but meeting you, talking to you, it's made me question stuff I never thought I would." Emma blinked back the surprise. She had challenged so many people before, but no one had ever said that. She smiled softly. "I've questioned a few things myself." Jake laughed gently. "So what does that make us?" "Complicated," she replied. "But maybe that's not a bad thing." As they sat under the night sky, something invisible but important passed between them. Not agreement, but understanding. And with that, a new kind of closeness began to grow. Back home, Emma couldn't stop replaying their conversation in the park. Jake had actually said he might be standing on the wrong side. That meant something. People didn't change their thinking easily, especially about topics that shaped their entire lives. Still, a quiet voice inside her whispered, "Don't get too comfortable." That voice got louder when she opened a group chat with her activist friends and saw messages flying. One of them had snapped a photo at the protest in D.C., Emma sitting on a bench beside Jake. "Who's the guy?" one message said. "That's Jake Mitchell," replied another. "Pro-policy guy. I've seen him at other events." Emma felt her chest tighten. She quickly replied, "He's just someone I've had a few conversations with." But the comments kept coming. "Be careful, that guy's dangerous. He's using you for information." "Don't fall for it, Emma. He's not one of us." Emma put the phone down. She felt torn. Part of her understood their anger. Their movement had always been about standing strong together. But what about listening? What about progress? Later that night, she got a text from Jake. "I hope I didn't say too much at the park. Just being honest." She stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "No, you were honest. That's what matters." But as she typed the words, her heart ached. Because standing between her world and Jake's was more than a protest line. It was a choice. and she didn't know which side her heart truly belonged to. Not yet. The following week, Emma was scheduled to speak at a local community event, an open forum about justice and youth activism. It wasn't her first time speaking, but this time felt different, heavier. The weight of her choices hung on her shoulders. She practiced her speech in front of her mirror, but her mind kept drifting to Jake. What would he think if he heard her speak? Would he understand? Or would it remind him of how different they really were? On the day of the event, the room filled with familiar faces. Activists, community leaders, young students. As she stepped up to the mic, her eyes scanned the crowd. And then she saw him. Jake, in the back row, alone. Her chest tightened. He had come. She adjusted the mic and took a breath. "I used to think the world was made of two sides," she began. "Good and bad, right and wrong, us and them." She paused. "But I've started to realize it's not always that simple. Some people believe what they do because it's all they've ever known. Some carry pain they've never spoken out loud. Some don't understand yet. But we don't build bridges by shouting across them. We build them by meeting in the middle." The room was silent. Not a protest, not a chant, just stillness. After the event, Emma stepped outside, the cold air brushing against her face. Jake was waiting near the sidewalk. "That was amazing," he said. "Thanks," she replied. "I didn't know if it would make sense to you." "It did," Jake said. "More than you know." Emma looked at him closely. "I think I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," he said, "but I'm still here." And for that moment, it was enough. They weren't on the same side, but they were standing together. Over the next few weeks, Emma and Jake didn't see each other in person. Life got busy. Emma had back-to-back community events, interviews and planning meetings for the next March. Jake returned to helping with his dad's veterans group and picked up extra hours at the local hardware store. But even with the distance, they stayed connected. Late-night texts, voice messages, the occasional photos sent with a caption like, "Thought of you." Still, something was shifting. One night, as Emma lay on her bed scrolling through her messages, she paused on one from Jake. "Wish I could see you this weekend. Things feel weird when we're not talking." She stared at the screen for a long time. She felt it too. When they weren't talking, it was like something important was missing from her day. And yet, she hadn't told anyone about Jake, not her sister, not even Tara. Part of her was afraid of how they'd react. Afraid they'd say she was forgetting who she was or why she started protesting in the first place. But what if Jake wasn't against her? What if he was part of her story now, not as an enemy, but as someone changing too? She finally replied, "I miss you too." Meanwhile, across town, Jake sat in his truck rereading her old speech notes she had sent him weeks ago. He highlighted a part she once underlined. "We don't need to agree to care, we just need to listen long enough to understand." He smiled, saved the note in his glove box and drove off under the city lights. They were far apart, but their hearts were still in motion, torn between old beliefs and something brave and new. It was a Saturday afternoon when Emma finally told someone the truth. She was sitting on the front porch with her sister Mia, sipping iced tea, when Mia asked the question casually, "Are you seeing anyone?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Kind of. It's complicated." Mia raised her eyebrows. "Complicated how?" Emma took a deep breath. "It's Jake, from the other side, from the protests." Mia nearly dropped her cup. "You mean the guy who stands behind the barriers with the "Protect the Badge" crowd?" Emma nodded again. "But he's not like them, not all the way. He listens, he's learning, and I think I like him." Mia stared at her for a long time, then looked away. "I don't know, Em. That's a line you can't just cross. People will talk. Your friends will think you've switched sides." Emma's voice was soft. What if the line never should have been there in the first place? That night she told Jake about the conversation. He didn't say much at first. Then he texts, "I get it. People don't want to see us together. They want clean stories. Good guy, bad guy, right, wrong. But life's not like that." Emma replied, "No, it's messier, but it's also more real." They didn't know what would happen next. The world was loud, judgmental, full of sharp opinions and labels. But in the quiet space between two phones, two people were learning that love didn't always follow rules. It didn't ask for permission. It just grew, slowly, honestly, and sometimes in places no one expected it to. It was just one photo. Emma and Jake had met up for coffee again, away from the usual spots, just a small corner cafe on the edge of the city. It was the first time they sat close without worrying about who might see. They weren't holding hands. And they weren't even touching. But they were smiling, genuinely, comfortably, and someone in the background snapped a photo without them knowing. 2 days later, the photo was posted on a protest forum. Caption: "Why is one of our strongest voices sitting with someone who stands against us?" The post exploded. Emma woke up to dozens of messages, some curious, others angry, some just disappointed. Jake messaged her first. "You okay?" She didn't know how to answer. Later that day, during a planning meeting for the next march, Tara pulled Emma aside. "I saw the photo. Is it true?" Emma nodded slowly. "It's true." Tara looked hurt. "I trusted you. We all did. You said you were fighting with us." "I still am," Emma replied. "But I'm also trying to understand people on the other side. People who might actually change, if we let them." Tara shook her head. "Not like this." That night, Emma and Jake sat on a park bench in silence, watching headlights pass by on the street. "I didn't want it to come out like this," she said. "I know," Jake replied, "but it was always going to. People hate what they don't understand." Emma looked at him. "Then let them hate." Because for once she wasn't ashamed. She had chosen understanding over judgment. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth standing for too. The backlash didn't die down. Emma received angry DMs, was removed from 2 group chats, and even got disinvited from an upcoming community panel she had helped organize. Just like that, her place in the movement began to slip through her fingers. Her sister tried to comfort her. "You knew this would happen," Mia said gently. "But I know why you did it." Emma nodded, but it didn't make it hurt less. She had spent years fighting for justice, raising her voice for the unheard, and now, because she had chosen to understand someone instead of fighting him, people questioned her loyalty. She got a message from Jake that evening. "You don't have to keep choosing me if it's costing you everything." Emma stared at the screen, heart pounding. She typed slowly. "This isn't just about you. It's about who I want to be. I can't preach love and understanding and then shut the door on someone who's trying." Jake replied after a long pause. "So what now?" Emma didn't have the answer. She just knew she wasn't going to hide anymore. The next morning she posted her own message online, one that went beyond the photo. "Yes, I'm seeing someone who stands on the other side. Yes, we disagree, but we also talk, we listen, we grow. Isn't that what real change is supposed to look like?" The comments came fast, some hateful, some hopeful. But her words were out there now. And in a world full of shouting, Emma had chosen to speak with truth. Even if it cost her everything. Because love built on honesty was stronger than any protest sign ever could be. Emma didn't expect what happened next. 2 days after her post, someone new messaged her, a girl named Kira from another activist group. "Just wanted to say thank you," the message read. "I've been talking to someone on the other side too. I was scared to tell anyone. You made me feel less alone." Emma stared at the message, stunned. More messages followed, quiet ones, from people who had been listening, reading, watching. "I thought I was the only one who believed in bridging the gap. I lost friends for talking to someone like Jake." "You're brave, thank you." Not all the messages were kind. There was still anger, still division, but now there were voices Emma hadn't heard before, voices that didn't fit neatly on one side or the other. At the coffee shop that weekend, Jake noticed it too. "So, you're starting a movement without trying?" he said, sipping his drink. "I think I'm just being honest," Emma replied. They sat together at their usual table, no longer hiding. People noticed. Some stared, a few whispered, but no one interrupted. Jake looked across the table at her. "What do you want from all of this, really?" Emma thought for a moment. "I want people to talk without yelling, to listen without judging. I want to believe that we can care about each other, even when we don't agree." Jake leaned back in his chair. "You know, before I met you, I thought the other side didn't want to understand. Now I'm not so sure." She smiled. That's all I needed to hear. Because in that small moment, a tiny piece of the world had shifted. And maybe, just maybe, change had already begun. Emma's phone buzzed with a message from the community center she volunteered at. "We're hosting a unity event next Saturday. We want your voice there. Bring anyone who represents change." Emma read the message twice. The last line echoed in her mind. Bring anyone who represents change. She stared at her phone, hesitated, and then typed a message to Jake. "You busy next Saturday?" "Depends," he replied. "Why?" "Want to come with me to a community event? It's a little formal, but I think you should be there." Jake took a while to reply. "You sure they'll want someone like me there?" Emma paused before responding. "If they don't, then maybe it's not the unity event they think it is." On the day of the event, Emma walked into the community center wearing a blazer and black boots. She looked confident, but her hands trembled at her sides. Jake showed up 5 minutes later, dressed simply but clean, his hair brushed back. When they entered together, the room quieted. People noticed. Tara, standing near the refreshment table, stared, her expression unreadable. Emma greeted a few people with polite smiles. Most nodded, a few avoided eye contact. Jake stayed close, but didn't speak unless spoken to. He knew his presence was loud, even in silence. Halfway through the event, one of the organizers pulled Emma aside. "Thank you for bringing him," she said quietly. "It makes people uncomfortable, but maybe that's a good thing." Emma nodded. Real change always does. When the speeches started, Emma took the mic. "We can't heal a divided world by staying in our corners," she said. "Sometimes healing begins when we sit beside the people we were taught to avoid." Jake watched her with quiet pride. This wasn't just a date. It was a statement, and everyone heard it loud and clear. The week after the event felt different. Emma had stepped into the spotlight, not just as a protester, but as a bridge between two divided worlds. Some people praised her bravery, others fell silent, and a few disappeared. One afternoon she bumped into Tara at the bookstore. It had been weeks since they'd really talked. "Hey," Emma said, trying to sound normal. Tara nodded. "Hey." They stood in the same aisle but felt miles apart. "I saw the speech," Tara finally said. "You were calm, passionate. You sounded different." Emma shifted uncomfortably. "Is that bad?" "Not bad, just not what I expected. You used to be fire, now you sound like peace." Emma smiled gently. "Maybe I'm just tired of burning everything down. Maybe it's time we start building something." Tara didn't smile back. "It's hard to build when the other side still throws stones." "I know," Emma said quietly, "but some of them are willing to put the stones down. Jake did." Tara exhaled. "I hope you're right, but I'm not there yet." They said goodbye with a simple wave, and Emma walked away with a heavy heart. Losing allies hurt, even when you believed you were doing the right thing. That night she told Jake about the encounter. "You don't have to keep doing this if it's tearing your life apart," he said. But Emma shook her head. "I didn't fall for you because it was easy. I fell because it was real, because it was brave. And if I lose a few people to stand beside someone who's growing, then maybe they weren't standing with me for the right reasons anyway." Jake looked at her and nodded. "Whatever this is, it's worth fighting for." And in that moment, neither side mattered. Only the truth did. A podcast episode dropped the next morning, one Emma wasn't expecting. A well-known activist had recorded an hour-long discussion titled "When Leaders Cross Lines, the Emma Clarkson Controversy." It quickly went viral. Clips circled social media. Emma's face appeared in thumbnails. Her words from the Unity event were played back with dramatic music underneath, like she had betrayed the very cause she once stood for. Emma watched in silence, her heart sinking. She hadn't prepared for this. Jake messaged her halfway through the day. "Do you want me to come over?" She replied, "Please." That evening they sat on her apartment floor, lights low, pizza untouched on the table. "I didn't think they'd care this much," Emma whispered. Jake shook his head. "They care because you matter. Your voice carries weight. That's not a bad thing, but it means they'll watch every move you make." She looked up at him, her eyes tired. "It hurts, being turned into someone I'm not. I'm not weak. I didn't switch sides. I just stopped seeing people as enemies." Jake leaned in, resting his hand over hers. "You're not weak. You're doing the hardest thing, trying to understand and still stand firm. That takes more strength than shouting ever did." Emma nodded, wiping her face. Later that night, she opened her laptop and recorded a short video. No script, no edits. Just her voice. If we only stand with those who already agree with us, we're not fighting for change, we're standing still. I'm not standing still, and I won't apologize for that. She posted it before she could overthink. Then she closed her laptop and leaned into Jake's shoulder. The storm outside their window was loud. But the calm between them was louder. A week later, things shifted again, but this time not because of the public. It started small, a disagreement over an article Jake shared on social media, something about law enforcement that Emma felt was tone deaf. She didn't say anything at first, but it sat with her all day, quietly building tension. That evening, during their usual coffee meetup, it finally came out. "You still don't get it sometimes," Emma said, putting her cup down harder than she meant to. Jake blinked. "What did I do?" "That post, about how not all officers are bad. You know how that looks coming from you." Jake frowned. "I wasn't saying your brother deserved what happened. I still believe there are good people trying to do their jobs." Emma shook her head. "But that's not the point. When you share things like that, it feels like you're ignoring the real pain people like me are trying to speak about." Jake leaned back. "And when you judge me for one post, it feels like you forget how far I've come." They both fell silent. For the first time, they weren't united. Not in this moment. The air between them was tight, fragile. Emma looked away. Maybe this was a mistake. Jake's voice was quiet. Maybe. Or maybe this is what it looks like when two people try to change without becoming the same. She looked at him then, really looked. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't backing down, but he wasn't walking away either. Emma sighed. "I don't want to lose what we've built." "Neither do I," Jake said. "But we can't pretend it'll always be easy." They sat in silence for a long time. Not broken. Just learning how to hold love in a world full of cracks. The next morning, Emma woke up with a heavy chest. She replayed the argument in her head line by line, wondering if she had been too harsh or if Jake had missed something deeper about her pain. She almost didn't text him. But then her phone lit up with a message from him first. "Still here, still listening. Want to talk?" Her eyes filled with relief. She replied simply, "Yeah." They met later that day at a quiet park bench near the lake, their place when they needed real talk without noise. "I thought about what you said," Jake began, "and you were right. I still carry a lot of ideas from how I was raised. Sometimes I forget what that looks like to someone like you." Emma nodded slowly. "And I could have handled it better. I didn't mean to shut you down, I've been carrying this weight for so long, and sometimes it spills out where it shouldn't." Jake looked at her with quiet eyes. "I don't want to just be your safe space when it's easy. I want to be the one who learns how to stand beside you when it's hard." Emma blinked quickly. "That's what I want too." He reached out and took her hand. "We're going to mess up," he said, "but as long as we're willing to grow, we're already doing something right." They sat there for a while, hands intertwined, watching birds land on the water. They didn't need to solve everything that day. They just needed to choose each other again. And they did. Because the strongest love isn't the one that avoids tension. It's the one that survives it. Later that week, Emma received a letter in the mail. No return address, just her name written in neat handwriting. She opened it slowly, unsure what to expect. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "I saw your speech. I heard your video. I used to be angry at you for choosing someone like him. But now, I think I get it. I've been yelling at the wrong people." It wasn't signed, but Emma knew exactly who it was from. Tara. Emma held the paper to her chest, feeling something inside soften. Forgiveness didn't always come through conversations. Sometimes it came in silence, in a letter, in a slow shift of understanding. That evening, she told Jake, "She wrote me, my friend, the one who stopped talking to me." Jake looked surprised. "What did she say?" "Not much, but enough to know she's listening again." Jake smiled. "That's all it takes sometimes, one person changing their view." Emma nodded. "And maybe that's what this whole thing has been about." He looked at her seriously. "Emma, I know we started from opposite sides, but you've never once tried to turn me into someone else. You just asked me to see you fully." "And you did," she said softly. They stood on her porch as the sun dipped low in the sky, orange light stretching across the horizon. I think love isn't about fixing people, Emma whispered. Jake smiled. I think it's about choosing them again and again. And under that fading sky, they chose each other. Again. Even with the scars. Even with the history. Because love that grows through struggle is the kind that truly stays. Fall arrived quietly, painting the trees gold and red. Emma and Jake started spending more time outside. Walks in the park, bookstore visits, late-night drives with the windows down. The world still felt divided, but in their little bubble, things felt calm. One afternoon they visited a local farm market outside the city. Jake held a basket while Emma browsed fresh apples and homemade candles. It felt simple, easy, almost normal. As they walked between stalls, an older woman approached them. "You two look sweet together," she said kindly. "Been together long?" Emma smiled. "Almost a year." The woman beamed. It's rare to see people who still make time for each other these days. They thanked her and walked on, but Emma could feel Jake watching her with quiet eyes. "What?" she asked, grinning. "You said almost a year." She shrugged. "It's close enough." Jake slowed his pace. "You ever think about where this goes?" "You mean, yeah, I mean, we started from such different roots. But now, I can't imagine my life without you in it." Emma's heart fluttered. She hadn't expected the conversation, but it didn't scare her. "I think about it all the time," she said, "and not in a fairy tale way, in a real way. I know it won't be easy, but I also know we've already made it through what most people wouldn't." Jake stopped walking. "So what if we kept building, you and me, not just something temporary, something permanent?" Emma looked at him. "Like a real future?" He nodded. She didn't answer right away, but her hand found his. And that was enough for now. Because even if their roots were different, their future could still grow from the same ground. Emma stood at the front of the auditorium, her heart beating fast. It had been months since she last gave a public speech, but this one felt different. This time, she wasn't speaking to argue or defend. She was sharing a story. Her own. Jake sat in the front row, wearing a soft smile, his hands resting on his knees. He didn't look nervous, just proud. Emma cleared her throat and began. "I used to think change only happened in the streets, with signs, with chants, but I've learned something else. Real change also happens in quiet rooms, in conversations, over coffee, and sometimes in love." She paused, letting the words breathe. "I fell for someone who stood on the opposite side of everything I believed, but instead of changing him, I listened, and instead of defending myself, I opened up." The room was silent, hanging on every word. Change isn't about winning, it's about seeing people fully and letting them see you. She didn't name Jake, she didn't need to. Everyone knew what. After the event, people lined up to shake her hand, to thank her, to ask questions. Some still disagreed, some admitted they weren't ready, but something had shifted. Later, as she walked out into the cool night air, Jake was waiting at the steps. "You were amazing," he said. She laughed. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." They walked to her car slowly, like neither wanted the night to end. Back where they had started, public spaces shared tension, but now with understanding in their hands. That night, they didn't talk about protests, politics, or the past. They talked about apartment hunting and trips they wanted to take. Because their future wasn't a maybe anymore. It was a plan. Jake had never been one for big gestures, but that didn't stop him from walking nervously into the tiny jewelry store on Main Street. He didn't know much about rings, just that he didn't want anything flashy. He wanted something simple, meaningful, real. Just like Emma. A week later, they were back at their favorite spot by the lake, bundled up in coats, their hands hidden in shared pockets as autumn leaves drifted around them. Jake had brought a small thermos of coffee and a paper bag of Emma's favorite cookies. She didn't notice anything unusual until he stopped walking and turned to face her. "I was going to make a big speech," he said. Emma tilted her head. "You? A speech?" He smiled nervously. "But the truth is, you already know everything I'd say. You've heard it all. You've lived it with me." She watched him reach into his coat pocket, and her breath caught. "I don't have a perfect past, and neither do you. but I've never wanted anything more than to build something honest with you, even when it's hard, even when it's messy." He opened the small box. "Will you marry me?" Emma stared, stunned. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Instead, she nodded slowly, as if everything she'd ever questioned suddenly made sense. "Yes," she whispered. No crowd, no cameras. Just two hearts that had traveled across opposing streets, now standing in the same place. They sat back down on the bench, hands trembling, smiles wide, the ring still in the box, untouched for now. Because for them the moment wasn't about the ring. It was about choosing each other. Again, and again, and again. The wedding was small, not because they couldn't afford more, but because they wanted it that way. Just close friends, family, and a few chairs set out in a quiet garden outside the city. Emma wore a cream dress with sleeves that danced in the breeze. Jake stood at the end of the aisle in a navy moon suit, eyes fixed on her like nothing else existed. There were no political signs, no protest banners, no division. Just two people, and the journey they had taken to get here. Mia stood beside Emma as her maid of honor. She had cried during the vows, though she pretended she wasn't. Even Tara showed up, sitting in the back row, quiet but smiling. Jake's father gave him a hug before the ceremony. "You've grown into the kind of man your mother would be proud of," he whispered. During their vows, Emma spoke first. "We didn't meet the way love stories usually begin. We started on opposite sides, built from different beliefs, shaped by different battles, but somewhere between the noise you listened. You didn't try to fix me, you just stayed. And that's how I knew I was safe." Jake took her hands gently and replied, "You made me see what I'd been blind to for so long. You challenged me, changed me, and loved me before I even loved myself." When the ceremony ended, they didn't throw rice or dance under sparklers. They simply walked away hand in hand into a life neither of them expected, but both of them chose. Because in a world that begged them to stay divided, they proved love could be louder, not perfect, but real. And in the end, that was enough. Thanks for watching. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more emotional love stories. New twists drop every day, only on Fated Heart Stories.